I am Monique, 32 years old, and I've spent my life being the family disappointment. I just flew into Hilton Head for our annual family trip. Standing in the lobby of the five-star resort, my sister Simone smirked. "We reserved rooms for the real family," she announced. "Me, my husband, and my child. There's no room for you." My parents just stared at the floor. They expected me to cry. They expected me to beg. Instead, I calmly asked the concierge for the presidential suite and paid with the Amex Black card they didn't know I possessed. I walked away, silencing their frantic calls. They thought they were shaming their failure daughter. They had no idea that just hours later, they would be begging me to use my secret connections to save my nephew's life. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the outsider in your own family. The lobby of the Sanctuary Resort in Hilton Head was an exercise in quiet old money wealth. Cool marble floors reflected the light from chandeliers that dripped crystals like frozen rain. I felt the South Carolina humidity cling to me as I walked in my simple canvas suitcase, rattling loudly on the polished stone. I was 32 years old, exhausted from the flight and 3 hours late. My family was already there, clustered near the check-in desk, looking like they owned the place. They were a perfect portrait of upper-class African-American success. My father, Charles, 60, and imposing, wore a crisp golf polo so expensive it probably had its own zip code. He was impatiently directing a bellhop about their luggage. My mother, Lorraine, 58 and elegant in a white linen dress, tapped impatiently on her phone, her brow furrowed in annoyance. My sister Simone, 30, was the glittering center of her own universe. She was laughing, tilting her head back as her husband Ryan whispered something in her ear. Ryan, 31, was the picture of East Coast preppy, his white skin a stark contrast to my family's. He looked like he'd been born wearing boat shoes. Their son, 3-year-old Jaden, was dangerously close to knocking over a potted palm near their mountain of Louis Vuitton luggage. I finally reached them, my throat tight with the familiar anxiety that always preceded a family gathering. "I'm so sorry I'm late," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The flight from DC had maintenance issues." Lorraine sighed, a sound of pure weaponized disappointment. She didn't look up from her phone. "You are always the last one, Monique. Always. You've kept the entire family waiting. Charles is getting impatient." Simone finally turned, her smile fading into a familiar, assessing look. She scanned my simple black travel outfit. "Oh, you made it." Her tone was flat, bored. "I was just telling Ryan," she said, loud enough for me to hear clearly. "I was half sure you wouldn't be able to afford the flight. Not with that little save-the-world job of yours." Ryan chuckled, pulling her closer. "Be nice, babe. She's trying her best." His condescension was worse than her cruelty. That job. Tech for Hope. They called it my little charity. They imagined me handing out laptops in a church basement for minimum wage. They never asked what I actually did. They never asked about the algorithms I wrote or the logistics platform I was building. They just saw non-profit and wrote me off as a failure. It was easier for them that way. It kept me in my place. My father finally turned away from the bellhop, his gaze sweeping over me. It wasn't a look of welcome, it was an appraisal. "Monique," he said, his voice curt. "You're here. Good. We've been waiting for half an hour." I said I was sorry, Dad. "The airline—" He cut me off. "Excuses don't change the fact that you're disorganized." He turned back to the desk, dismissing me. "Charles Whitfield," he announced to the concierge. "We're checking in." Simone finally turned, her bright, practiced smile fading the moment it landed on me. She scanned my simple black travel outfit, her eyes lingering on my canvas suitcase before meeting mine with a look of profound boredom. "Oh, you made it." Her voice was flat, all the earlier sparkle gone. "I was just telling Ryan," she said, loud enough for me and the bellhop to hear clearly. "I was half sure you wouldn't be able to afford the flight. Not with that little save-the-world job of yours." Ryan, her husband, chuckled and wrapped an arm around her shoulder, pulling her close. He looked at me with a sickeningly sweet, patronizing smile. "Be nice, babe," he murmured, his voice dripping with condescension. "She's trying her best. Trying my best." That's what they all thought. That job. Tech for Hope. That's all they knew. In their minds, I worked for a tiny, struggling nonprofit probably run out of a church basement handing out refurbished laptops for a salary that barely covered my rent in DC. They pictured me in cardigans, eating lentils, perpetually broke and perpetually single. They never asked what Tech for Hope actually was. They never asked about the complex logistics algorithms I designed or the multi-million-dollar grants I helped secure. They never asked about our government contracts or our international partners. It was easier for them to see me as the pity case, the bleeding heart, the family failure, who didn't understand the real world. It made their own choices seem more valid, more successful. My little charity was the perfect counterpoint to Simone's high-status marriage and my father's cold corporate success. My father cut off any response I might have had. His patience, already thin, had snapped. "That's enough," he said, his voice a low growl of irritation. He wasn't defending me. He was annoyed by the delay, by the scene. "Let's get checked in. The whole family is tired." He turned his back on me, completely stepping forward to command the full attention of the concierge. The message was clear. The conversation was over. I was dismissed. "Charles Whitfield," he announced, his voice booming with authority. "I have a reservation for 2 suites." The concierge gave my father a polished, professional smile. "Yes, Mr. Whitfield, we have your reservations right here." Her fingers tapped lightly on the keyboard. "1 oceanfront suite for yourself and Mrs. Whitfield, and 1 adjoining junior suite for Mrs. Simone's family. We have already noted your request for a crib for Jaden." "Excellent," my father said, nodding sharply. He stepped aside for Simone and Ryan to receive their key cards. I stepped forward, placing my purse on the marble counter. "Excuse me," I said to the concierge, offering a small, tired smile. "I should have a 3rd room, Monique Whitfield." The concierge's smile faltered for just a second. "Of course, ma'am. Let me check that for you." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. I glanced back at my family. Simone was laughing at something Ryan whispered, deliberately ignoring me. My father was examining a brochure for the resort's golf course. The concierge said softly. She typed again. "Miss Whitfield, could it be under a different name or perhaps a separate booking?" "I don't think so," I said, the knot in my stomach tightening. "It should be with the main party, Monique Whitfield." The concierge looked genuinely apologetic now. She lowered her voice slightly. "Ma'am, I am terribly sorry. I've searched every way I can. The only reservations associated with the Whitfield party are the oceanfront suite and the junior suite. There is no 3rd room booked under your name." The words hung in the air, cold and final. The background hum of the lobby, the quiet chatter, the distant clinking of glasses from the bar seemed to fade to nothing. There was only a rushing sound in my ears. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. I turned slowly to face my family. Ryan had a small, cruel smirk on his face. Simone was studying her fingernails with intense interest, a tiny smile playing on her lips. They knew. They had been waiting for this. I looked at my parents. My mother, Lorraine, suddenly found the pattern on the marble floor, utterly fascinating, refusing to meet my eyes. And my father, Charles, he had turned his entire body away from the counter. He was staring intently out the grand floor-to-ceiling windows, his hands clasped behind his back, perfectly still, as if he were admiring the ocean view and had heard nothing at all. He had left me alone to be humiliated. My father's rigid back was all the answer I needed, but it was my mother, Lorraine, who finally broke the silence. She turned her face a mask of practiced, airy concern. Her voice was light, almost breezy, as if she were commenting on the weather. "Oh, Monique, honey," she said, her voice carrying just enough for the concierge to hear. "I just assumed you would book your own room." You know this trip is terribly expensive and you're 32 years old now. We figured you'd want your own arrangements. I stared at her. Assumed. After 15 years of this tradition where the family bookings were always handled by our parents. Before I could even find my voice, my father, Charles, finally spoke. He didn't turn around, but his voice was curt, cutting through the lobby's quiet hum. Your mother is right. We had to prioritize Simone and Ryan. He finally glanced over his shoulder, his expression annoyed. They have Jaden. They're a family. They need more space, more consideration. You, he said, waving a dismissive hand in my direction, are just one person. You're alone. You can handle it. Don't complicate things. Don't complicate things. My presence was a complication. My needs were an inconvenience. I was not a priority. I was the line item they could cut to make everything else work. The humiliation was so sharp, so sudden, it was hard to breathe. The concierge, seeing the entire awful family drama play out, looked at me with genuine pity. She lowered her voice, trying to be discreet. Ma'am, she said, her eyes full of apology. I'm so sorry, but we are almost completely full for the week. The only rooms I have left are, well, they're the presidential suite or a standard room with a parking lot view. She clearly expected me to ask about the standard room. She saw my simple suitcase, my travel-worn clothes, and my family's obvious disdain. She saw the failure they wanted her to see. Just as the concierge mentioned the standard room, a sharp, cold laugh cut through the lobby. It was Simone. She was laughing so hard she had to lean against Ryan for support. All pretense of politeness was gone, replaced by open mockery. Oh, Mo, she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. I thought you understood. You're just so literal sometimes. She stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. Mom and Dad booked rooms for the family. She paused, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the final blow. I mean for my family. Me, Ryan, and Jaden. She wrapped both arms around Ryan's arm and nuzzled his shoulder, performing for the entire lobby. You see, we are a real family, she cooed, looking up at him. We have a child. We need the extra space. We need the adjoining suite. You know how it is with toddlers. They have so many things, so many needs. Ryan, her husband, put his arm around her waist, pulling her in. He smiled at me, a smug, superior look on his face. She's right, he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. Family units like ours just have more requirements. Kids need a lot of support. He then looked me up and down, taking in my single suitcase and tired face. Someone like you, a single woman, you're just so much more flexible. It's one of the perks of your lifestyle, right? He didn't wait for an answer. He leaned in as if sharing a helpful tip. I'm sure you can find a Motel 6 or something just down the highway. They're perfectly adequate. He patted his pocket. Don't worry, once we get settled in our suite, we'll be sure to text you the location. His words hit me harder than a physical slap. A Motel 6. He was suggesting his sister-in-law, should go to a cheap roadside motel while they enjoyed their 5-star suites. The insult was breathtaking in its cruelty, and the look on Simone's face showed she savored every second of it. This was the moment they had planned. This was the final public declaration that I was not and would never be part of their real family. I just stood there, motionless. The sound of Simone's laughter and Ryan's condescending suggestion about a Motel 6 echoed in the opulent lobby. I felt the concierge's pitying stare and the curious glances from other guests. A hot, furious blush crept up my neck. This wasn't just a simple oversight. It was a statement. A public, deliberate humiliation. And I knew deep down this wasn't the first time. This was just the loudest. My mind flashed back to Thanksgiving last year. We were all at my parents' house, the table groaning with food. I had been excited, genuinely excited, to share a personal victory. I'd just spent 3 sleepless weeks developing a new encryption protocol for our logistics platform. The code finally worked, I told my father, trying to explain the complexity. It could revolutionize how we secure data. Charles just nodded, his eyes already drifting past me. That's nice, Monique. He then turned completely to Ryan, his face lighting up with genuine interest. "So Ryan, tell me about that new BMW 5 Series. How's the handling on the turnpike? My complicated achievement. The thing I had poured my soul into was dismissed in less than 10 seconds to make room for a conversation about a car." Then I remembered Christmas just last year. Under the tree there was a velvet envelope for Simone and Ryan containing airline tickets for a week-long ski trip to Aspen, all expenses paid. My gift opened right after was a nice but simple cashmere sweater. The message was as clear as the diamond earrings they'd given Simone. They were a destination. I was an obligation. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a fraction of the approval they gave Simone for just existing, for marrying well, for producing a grandchild. I built a company from scratch in one of the most competitive fields in the world, and I was still just Monique, the disorganized, single charity worker daughter. They had always been the real family. I was just the guest they couldn't figure out how to uninvite. Standing there in the lobby, the cold finality of that truth settled over me, and the anger that had been simmering for 20 years finally began to burn. Lorraine finally turned to me, her face a mask of weary impatience. "Now, Monique, don't make a scene," she hissed, her voice low and urgent. "People are staring at us. You're embarrassing the family." She attempted a thin, placating smile. "Just be reasonable. Go find a standard room like the nice lady suggested. Don't be difficult. Please don't ruin the whole family's vacation just because of a little booking mix-up." A little mix-up. The casual dismissal. The immediate positioning of me as the problem, the one ruining their vacation. It was the same tactic she had used my entire life. Make me small. Make my needs an inconvenience. Make me feel guilty for existing outside their perfect plan. I looked at her. I looked at my father's rigid back, my sister's smug smile, and my brother-in-law's condescending pity. I saw them all clearly. And in that instant, something inside me, a tightly wound coil of 32 years of frustration, finally snapped. I stood up straight. The exhaustion that had clung to me from the flight vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp calm. It was a clarity so profound it almost made me dizzy. I was done. I was so completely and utterly done. I took one deep, steadying breath. Then I turned my back on my family, completely dismissing them. I focused all my attention on the stunned concierge, who was still looking at me with that awful, pitying expression. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear and strong, cutting through the lobby's quiet. The concierge blinked, surprised. I smiled a small, polite smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm sorry for the confusion. You mentioned you had 2 types of rooms left, one with a view of the parking lot. And the presidential suite, ma'am," she finished, almost wincing, "but as I said, it's $5,000 per night." She was trying to spare me further embarrassment. "The presidential suite," I repeated, nodding slowly. "That sounds lovely." I looked her directly in the eye. "I'll take it. For 3 nights." The silence in the lobby was sudden and absolute. The concierge's professional smile froze on her face. Behind me, I could hear Simone make a small choking sound, as if she'd swallowed her own laughter. Ryan just stood there, his smug expression wiped clean off his face. My mother Lorraine simply gaped, her mouth hanging open. Simone was the first to recover her voice, a high-pitched, incredulous shriek. "What the hell are you doing, Monique? Stop this! You can't afford that. Where did you get that kind of money?" She took a step closer, her face twisting in contempt. "Did you take out another loan? Is this more credit card debt? Are you insane?" I didn't look at her. I didn't look at any of them. I kept my eyes on the concierge, who still looked confused and deeply uncomfortable. I calmly reached into my designer handbag, a bag they'd probably assumed was a cheap knockoff. My fingers brushed past my wallet and closed around a small, heavy object. I pulled it out. It was a sleek, jet-black card crafted from anodized titanium. It made a solid, definitive thud as I placed it on the marble counter. The American Express Centurion card. The black card. The concierge's eyes widened. The pity vanished instantly, replaced by a look of stunned, almost reverent respect. Her entire posture changed. She stood up straighter. "Of course, Miss Whitfield," she said, her voice now smooth as silk. "My apologies for the confusion." She took the card as if it were fragile. "The presidential suite for 3 nights. I will process that for you immediately. We will have a personal attendant escort you to your room." "Thank you," I said quietly. I finally allowed myself to glance back at my family. Simone and Ryan were staring at the card, their faces blank with confusion. They didn't understand what it was. But my father did. Charles, who had been pretending to study the golf brochure, was now staring at the counter, his face pale. I saw his hand clench at his side. He knew that card. He recognized it. I remembered him complaining for years, boasting to his friends that he was on the list trying to get invited. He was a man who defined his entire worth by his financial status, and this card was the one status symbol he had never been able to acquire. And I, his failure daughter, had just slapped it down on the counter like it was nothing. The concierge quickly processed the payment, her movements efficient and deferential. She handed me the receipt to sign. "Your attendant will be here momentarily, Ms. Whitfield. He will bring your luggage to the suite and can arrange anything else you require." I signed my name on the line and handed it back. "Thank you," I said. "And could you please have a private car service ready for me immediately? I've had a change of plans." "Right away, Ms. Whitfield," she replied, already picking up her phone. With that settled, I finally turned to face my family. They were still frozen in the same tableau of disbelief. My father's face was a dangerous shade of pale, his jaw clenched. My mother looked like she was about to be sick. Simone and Ryan just looked confused, as if their brains couldn't process this new information. I looked at them, my voice perfectly calm, perfectly level. "You were right, Mom, Dad." They just stared. "You're right," I continued. "I wouldn't want to complicate your vacation or take up precious space. I certainly don't want to be the one to ruin the real family's trip." I picked up my handbag from the counter. "So I'll be leaving. I'll get out of your way." The shock finally broke and my father's face flooded with color. "Monique, stop this right now." He seethed, his voice low and furious. "Stop this ridiculous performance. You are making a fool of yourself and embarrassing this entire family." I actually laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. "Embarrassing the family," I repeated, looking him directly in the eye. "You think I'm the one causing embarrassment?" I let the question hang in the air, the hypocrisy of it thick enough to choke on. "I think abandoning your daughter in a hotel lobby, telling her you didn't book her a room, and having your son-in-law suggest she find a Motel 6 is what's embarrassing, Dad." I straightened my jacket. "You told me to handle my own arrangements. You told me I was on my own and that I should get out of the way of the real family. That's exactly what I'm doing. I am handling it." Lorraine's face cycled through panic and frustration. This was not going according to plan. She was supposed to be in control, the benevolent mother managing her difficult, less successful daughter. Now her difficult daughter was holding a status symbol her husband couldn't get, and the entire hotel staff was treating her like royalty. Lorraine lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Her voice was a high-pitched, desperate whine. "Monique, stop this. You're being petulant. I told you we could figure something out. You always overreact. You always make things so dramatic. We can call the front desk and see if they have another room on a lower floor. Don't be so stubborn." I looked down at her manicured hand clutching my sleeve. Then I looked up and met her eyes. The coldness in my gaze made her flinch and let go. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice cutting and clear. "I am done making things complicated." I turned my back on her. I turned my back on all of them. "I understand the situation perfectly," I said, speaking to the open air of the lobby. "I'm not part of the real family. I am on my own. I am handling it." I looked at the concierge, who was watching with breathless attention. "My luggage will be sent to the suite." "Yes, Ms. Whitfield, immediately," the concierge said. "Thank you," I replied. "Have a wonderful vacation, everyone." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked toward the grand revolving glass doors. I didn't take my simple canvas suitcase. I left it there an orphan next to their mountain of Louis Vuitton. I didn't need it. I knew it would be taken care of. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor was the only sound in the lobby. Each step felt powerful. Each step was a step away from 32 years of being made to feel small, secondary, and unworthy. Monique! My father's voice exploded behind me. It wasn't a request. It was a command. A roar of absolute authority that had governed my entire life. Monique, get back here. I am still talking to you. You do not walk away from me. I kept walking. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the lobby on my back. I felt Simone's shock, Ryan's confusion, and my mother's panicked embarrassment. But most of all, I felt my father's white-hot rage that his authority was being publicly defied. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped out into the humid South Carolina air. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. The screen lit up with one word, Dad. He hadn't waited 10 seconds. He was already trying to re-establish control to pull me back to verbally wrestle me into submission, where he could lecture me, berate me, and put me back in my failure box. I stared at the screen. Dad. Calling. For a moment, the old conditioned reflex flared up. Answer it. Appease him. Make the conflict stop. Then I thought of Simone's laugh. Ryan's Motel 6. My mother's weak excuses. My father's silent back. I pressed the red decline button on the side of my phone. The ringing stopped. The silence that followed felt like the first real breath I had taken all day. I slipped the phone into my pocket just as the gleaming black Maybach pulled up to the curb. I stood under the grand portico of the resort, the warm, humid South Carolina air, a strange contrast to the icy chill of the lobby. My phone buzzed in my hand. And again, a relentless series of vibrations. I looked down not to answer, but to read the inevitable fallout. The screen was a cascade of their panic and rage. First, a text from my father Charles. What do you think you are doing? Get back inside this hotel right now. It was a command as if I were a rebellious teenager, and not a 32-year-old woman he had just publicly disowned. I read the words and felt nothing. I deleted the message. The phone buzzed again immediately. My mother, Lorraine. Monique, you are making a terrible scene. Everyone in the lobby is staring. You are embarrassing your father. Please stop being so selfish and just come back inside. Selfish, embarrassing. The same words she had used my entire life to control me, to make her feelings my responsibility, to shame me back into my designated box. I deleted her message. Another vibration, this time Simone. Are you serious with that fake credit card, LOL? Who are you trying to impress? You think you're so special, Dad is furious. Can't wait to see how long you can keep up this rich girl act before you come crawling back. You'll always be a failure, Mo. Always. Failure. That was her favorite word for me. The one that for years had always hit its mark. I stared at the word on the screen, and for a moment the old familiar sting of worthlessness pricked at my heart. But then I looked up. A car was pulling up to the curb. It was not a taxi or a standard rideshare. It was a Maybach S-Class, a silent black phantom of a car so polished it looked like liquid night. It was longer than a standard sedan, the very picture of discreet, undeniable wealth. It glided to a stop directly in front of me, its engine a low, powerful purr. My phone buzzed again. Lorraine, Monique, what is that car? Did you call a limo? You cannot afford that. I silenced the phone completely and slipped it back into my pocket. The back door of the Maybach opened, pushed from the outside by a chauffeur. He was tall, dressed in a sharp, dark uniform with a driver's cap. He was a professional, not just a driver. He stepped onto the curb, his posture perfect, and nodded respectfully at me. Good evening, Miss Monique, he said, his voice polite and professional. He held the door open for me. I nodded and moved to get in. Mr. Marcus is waiting for you at the villa. I nodded to the chauffeur and slid into the back seat. The interior of the car was absurdly luxurious, smelling of rich leather and polished wood. The door closed with a soft, heavy thud, instantly sealing out the sounds of the resort, the humid air, and my family's frantic energy. There was only silence. The car pulled away from the curb, its movement so smooth it felt more like floating than driving. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their eyes on the car as we disappeared down the long palm-lined driveway. Inside the lobby, my family stood frozen, staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the disappearing taillights of the Maybach. The bellhops, still holding their luggage, awkwardly looked between them and the door. Ryan was the first to speak, his voice a disbelieving stammer. That was a Maybach, an S-Class, with a private chauffeur. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time. What the hell is going on? How does she get a Maybach? My father. Charles said nothing. He stood perfectly still, his face a mask of cold fury. His hands were clasped so tightly behind his back his knuckles were white. He hadn't understood the black card, not really, but he understood the car. He understood the chauffeur. It was a display of wealth and power that he hadn't orchestrated, that he didn't control. And he hated it. He hated her for it. He had no idea what was happening, and that made him more furious than anything else. Simone, recovering from her shock, immediately reached for the only explanation that made sense in her world. She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic." She tossed her hair, her voice dripping with renewed scorn. "It's obvious, isn't it? She finally found one. A rich boyfriend, some tech billionaire or hedge fund guy she's latched onto." She looked at Ryan, then at her parents, seeking agreement. That's so typical of her, always needing to be rescued, always relying on a man. She laughed, that same sharp, cruel sound from before. She's probably his mistress. That's how she got that credit card. She's just pretending to be something she's not. It's pathetic, really. Lorraine, my mother, seized on this explanation, nodding eagerly. Simone's right, Charles. Of course, it must be a man. Monique would never be able to afford that on her own. The idea that I had achieved this myself was so impossible, so outside their narrative of me, that it didn't even occur to them. The Maybach drove for 20 minutes, leaving the manicured public grounds of the sanctuary resort far behind. The chauffeur turned onto a private unmarked road, pressing a code into a discreet keypad. A set of high modern security gates swung open silently, granting us access. We wound through a lush private maritime forest, the ancient trees draped in Spanish moss creating a canopy of green. I had no idea this part of the island even existed. The road opened up to a stunning cliffside, and my breath caught. The car stopped not at a house but at a masterpiece. It was a sprawling modern villa made of dark wood glass and white stone, built directly into the bluff, seeming to float over the Atlantic Ocean. It was so private, so architecturally significant, it made my family's five-star resort look like a common chain hotel. The chauffeur opened my door. "Mr. Thorne is on the main terrace, Ms. Monique. Welcome." I walked through a massive open-air living room. The walls were glass retracted to let the sea breeze flow through, carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. The space was filled with minimalist art and low, comfortable furniture. And then I saw him. Marcus was standing by an infinity pool that seemed to melt directly into the ocean horizon. At 45, he was the picture of understated power. Tall, calm, and impeccably dressed in linen trousers and a dark blue shirt that made him look more like a philosopher than a tech mogul. He was the anchor, the strategist, the man who saw the entire chessboard while everyone else was just looking at the next move. He turned as I approached, his face breaking into a warm, genuine smile that held no judgment, only welcome. 2 glasses of red wine were already poured, sitting on the low table between 2 deep lounge chairs. "I take it," he said, his voice smooth and deep, "that the family reunion did not go smoothly." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I stepped off the plane. I sank into one of the chairs, my anger and adrenaline finally giving way to a profound, bone-deep weariness. I picked up one of the wine glasses, It was an expensive Bordeaux complex and comforting. You could say that, I murmured, staring out at the water. It was worse than I thought, Marcus. Much worse. He didn't pry. He just waited, giving me the space to speak. That was his way. They didn't book a room for me, I said, the words still tasting like ash in my mouth. They just left me standing in the lobby, my own family. Marcus just nodded, his expression unreadable but completely supportive. I laughed, a humorless broken sound. My father pretended to be looking out the window. My mother blamed me for making a scene and told me to be reasonable. And then Simone? I paused, the final humiliation, the very words still stinging. What did Simone say? He asked gently. She laughed. I said, my voice quiet. She told me they had to prioritize. That she, Ryan, and Jaden are the real family. I finally looked at him, the tears I had refused to shed in front of them now burning in my eyes. A real family, and I'm not. I'm the extra, the burden, the one they left behind at the check-in desk. They told me, I whispered, to find a Motel 6. Marcus took a slow sip of his wine, his eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. He finally let out a low, humorless laugh. A Motel 6. He repeated, shaking his head. They really have no idea, do they? After all these years, they still see you as that struggling charity worker. He turned to me, a small, ironic smile on his face. A charity worker at Tech for Hope, their little pity project. The failure daughter who couldn't even manage to land a real corporate job. I looked down into my wine, swirling the dark liquid. They don't know the truth, Marcus. They never bothered to ask. I let out a long sigh. They have no idea that Tech for Hope isn't some tiny nonprofit I just work for. They don't know it's our foundation. That was the secret. The one I had kept for 6 long years. My family, in their rush to categorize me as the unsuccessful bleeding heart failure, had never once bothered to look up the organization I was so passionate about. Tech for Hope was a nonprofit. It provided tech education and resources to underserved communities. But it was also the philanthropic arm of Oratech, the company I had built from the ground up alongside Marcus. 6 years ago, while my family was busy planning Simone's lavish 6-figure wedding, I was in a garage in Palo Alto with Marcus writing the foundational code for what would become Oratech. I was the co-founder. I was the chief technology officer. I was the M in M. Thorne, the anonymous coding genius the tech blogs were always trying to identify. I was the architect behind our company's revolutionary artificial intelligence platform, the one that managed secure logistics for some of the largest corporations and governments in the world. While my father was bragging about his regional business contacts, I was quietly negotiating contracts with the Department of Defense. Just last month, after we secured the new J-Core logistics contract, Oratech's valuation had been finalized. $1.2 billion. My 40% stake in the company made me one of the youngest self-made women in the tech industry. It was a truth so large, so completely opposite to their narrative of me, that I had kept it hidden. I wanted to see just once if they could love me, or even just respect me without the validation of money. I wanted to know if my father could ever be proud of me, Monique, the daughter, not Monique Whitfield, the CTO. The scene in the lobby had been my answer. A clear, brutal, and definitive no. Marcus looked at me, his expression softening from irony to a familiar brotherly concern. You still haven't told them, have you? He asked, though he already knew the answer. After all this, you're just letting them believe it. I shook my head, turning to look out at the endless twilight ocean. The salt spray felt cool on my face. I was going to, I said, my voice quiet. I really was. This trip. I thought this would be the time. I had imagined this moment for months. I'd pictured a family dinner perhaps a few nights into the vacation. I'd imagined calmly telling them about Oratech, about the contracts, about the valuation. Not to brag, not to show off, but just to finally be seen. I had this fantasy, I admitted feeling foolish. I thought if I just laid it all out, if I showed them the proof of my success, maybe they'd finally get it. Maybe my father would finally look at me with the same pride he has when he talks about Ryan's real estate deals or Simone's perfect family. I took a shaky sip of wine. I just wanted to see if they could respect me. Just Monique. Not Monique the CTO or Monique the secret billionaire. Just me. The daughter they've spent 32 years dismissing as disorganized and too sensitive. I wanted to know if my father could be proud of me without the money. I whispered, finally saying the quiet, painful truth aloud. I wanted to know if the work I did mattered to him on its own, not just because of the paycheck. I kept it a secret because I was terrified that if I told them any affection they might show wouldn't be real. It would just be for the money. And I guess I was even more terrified that if I didn't tell them they would just go on seeing me as a failure forever. I turned back to Marcus, my eyes stinging. The joke's on me, right? I designed this test for them, and they failed it so spectacularly they didn't even know they were taking it. The lobby, the Motel 6, the real family. That was my answer. I looked out at the ocean again. They can't. He can't. The finality of that realization settled on me heavy as an anchor. The hope I had carried for so long, the secret childish wish that one day my father would finally see me, it died right there in that hotel lobby. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone, which I'd set to vibrate only, began to buzz relentlessly on the stone table beside my wine glass. The screen lit up Lorraine. Incoming call. I stared at it. She was calling again. Panicked. Desperate. Not because she missed me, but because she was embarrassed. Because her daughter had defied her, had shown a flash of power she couldn't explain, and had disrupted her perfect family image. The phone continued its angry, insistent buzzing. I picked it up. Marcus watched me, saying nothing. I looked at my mother's name on the screen. I saw her face in my mind, her expression of pained, impatient disapproval. Then deliberately I pressed and held the power button. The screen went black. I set the phone down now, a dead, useless piece of glass. Now, I said, taking another deep breath of the free, salt-filled air. I'm going to enjoy my vacation. Back in the oceanfront suite at the sanctuary, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The beautiful panoramic view of the Atlantic Ocean went completely unnoticed. Lorraine was pacing the thick, expensive carpet, her hands twisting the strap of her handbag. Simone and Ryan sat stiffly on a silk sofa, whispering frantically to each other. My father Charles stood by the window, his back rigid. He had been silent for the entire elevator ride, the silence radiating a cold fury. Finally, he turned his face, a mask of controlled rage. "Stop whispering, both of you," he commanded. Simone and Ryan fell silent. "Ryan!" Ryan looked up, startled, like a student caught cheating. "Yes, Charles. Get your laptop, now." Ryan practically scrambled to retrieve his sleek silver laptop from his briefcase. He sat at the suite's ornate desk, looking at my father expectantly. "I want to know about that car," Charles said, his voice dangerously quiet. "That Maybach. I want to know who owns it, and I want to know everything you can find about a man named Marcus. The driver said, 'Mr. Marcus is waiting. Find him.'" "Right away, Charles," Ryan said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The only sound in the room for the next few minutes was the rapid click-clack of the keys and Lorraine's anxious, shallow breathing. "Okay," Ryan said, his voice strained. "The car, it's a 2025 Maybach S-Class. It's registered to a corporate entity, Oratech Holdings LLC. Oratech," Charles repeated, testing the name. "What is Oratech?" I'm looking, Ryan typed furiously. He suddenly stopped. He leaned closer to the screen. "Oh, my God." "What is it? Spit it out," Charles snapped. Ryan swallowed, his eyes wide. "Charles, you need to see this." He turned the laptop around. "Marcus. His full name is Marcus Thorne. He's the founder and CEO of Oratech." Lorraine stopped pacing. A CEO? Is it a real company? Real. Ryan let out a short hysterical laugh. Lorraine, it's not just real. This company, they're a giant. A private defense and logistics tech firm. They they just signed a $1.7 billion contract with the Pentagon last month. They're what they call a unicorn, Charles. A massive, massive unicorn. The room fell completely silent. Simone, who had been staring blankly at her husband, suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her face went pale. Aura Tech, she whispered, her voice trembling. Aura Tech. Ryan, look up the Aura Tech Foundation. Ryan, his own hands shaking slightly, typed again. It's here. Their philanthropic arm. Wait. Oh my God. The Aura Tech Foundation is the primary funding source for Tech for Hope. Tech for Hope. Lorraine repeated, her voice a faint whisper. That's Monique's little charity. The one she's always working at. It's not her charity, Mom, Simone said, her voice rising in panic. It's their charity. It's his. That's the connection. Lorraine sank onto the edge of the king-sized bed, her hands fluttering at her throat. So, Monique knows him. She knows the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Why didn't she tell us? Why would she keep something like that a secret? Charles slammed his hand down on the desk, making Ryan jump and the ice in a nearby water glass rattle. Don't be a fool, Lorraine, he roared, his face dark with fury and humiliation. She doesn't just know him, she works for him. Simone seized on this, her eyes narrowing. That's it. That's what this is. She's not a charity worker. She's his employee. Probably his executive assistant or something. That's why he sent a car. That's why she has that credit card. It's a company card. Charles. Ryan said, his face pale. An executive assistant with a Centurion card. That's highly unlikely. I don't care. Charles was pacing, now his rage palpable. She has been hiding this. That girl. That ungrateful, secretive girl. She has been lying to us for years, working for this tech mogul while pretending to be some poor, struggling victim. Lorraine looked bewildered. But why would she hide a good job? Because she's manipulative, Charles spat. She's been playing us, playing me. She stood there in that lobby and let me believe she was nothing. She's been laughing at us. That's what this is about. Humiliation. The restaurant was called The Tides. It was the island's only 3-star Michelin establishment, notoriously impossible to get into, and located in a separate private cove away from the main resort. The dining room was intimate, with perhaps only 15 tables, each one perfectly spaced for privacy. An entire wall of glass opened directly onto the beach, where the ocean, bathed in moonlight, provided the only real decoration necessary. The sound of the surf was a quiet, rhythmic backdrop to the clinking of silver and crystal. Marcus had arranged the reservation, of course. We were seated at the best table in the house, a corner booth that offered a panoramic view of both the ocean and the room. The Frankfurt expansion is looking solid, Marcus was saying, swirling his wine. Their regulatory hurdles are lower than we anticipated. If we move now, we could have the data hub operational by Q3. That's aggressive, I said, cutting into my seared scallops. But I like it. My algorithm for the new logistics platform is almost ready. It'll cut processing time by 30%. If we launch that in conjunction with the new hub, we'll dominate the European market before our competitors even know we're there. He smiled, raising his glass. That's my CTO, always 3 moves ahead. We clinked glasses, the quiet gesture of 2 partners who trusted each other implicitly. We were comfortable in our element, discussing billion-dollar strategies with the same ease that others might discuss the weather. It was in that moment of quiet confidence that I felt their eyes on me. I didn't look up immediately. I just continued my conversation with Marcus, but my senses sharpened. I glanced to the left, using the reflection in the glass wall. There they were. Sitting at a small, awkward table near the service entrance, Simone and Ryan, They must have pulled every string, probably even dropped my father's name, just to get a last-minute table, all to continue their surveillance. They were pretending to read their menus, but their attention was fixed entirely on us. Simone was whispering furiously to Ryan behind her napkin. Ryan was staring at Marcus with an expression of pure, unadulterated envy. They were trying so hard to look casual, but they stuck out in this environment like cheap costume jewelry. Ryan's suit was too flashy. Simone's dress was too tight. They were trying to look wealthy. Marcus and I just were. I turned back to Marcus and smiled, deliberately ignoring them. So, I continued taking a bite of scallop about the Frankfurt server capacity. I have an idea. We laughed at something he said, a genuine relaxed sound. We discussed our work, our shared history, our plans. We were two equals, two partners, comfortable and powerful. And across the room I could feel the heat of my sister's stare burning with a confusion and rage that for the first time in my life, I found completely, utterly irrelevant. We were halfway through our main course when the shadow fell over our table. Simone was standing there, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of an empty chair. Her face was flushed a mask of poorly concealed fury and confusion. Ryan lingered a few steps behind her, looking like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Mo," she spat, her voice a low, trembling hiss. "But it stops now. You're making a fool of yourself and you're making the whole family sick with worry." I slowly placed my fork down on the edge of my plate. I didn't look up at her immediately. I took a small sip of my wine, letting the silence stretch, letting her stand there under the gaze of the other diners. Finally, I lifted my eyes. My expression was not angry, not sad. It was cold. "A game, Simone?" I asked, my voice quiet but carrying. "You call this a game? I would call being abandoned in a hotel lobby by my entire family a game. I'm just playing by the rules you all set. I'm taking care of myself just like Dad suggested." Before Simone could form a retort, Marcus placed his napkin on the table and stood up. He was taller than Ryan and his presence was instantly commanding. He wasn't aggressive, just completely, unshakably calm. He offered Simone a polite, disarming smile. "Good evening. You must be Simone," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "I'm Marcus Thorne. It's a genuine pleasure to finally meet you. Monique has told me so much about you." His politeness threw her off balance. She stared at him, momentarily speechless. All her practiced aggression was designed for me, the sister she could bully. It was useless against him. She visibly fumbled, trying to regain control. She glanced from his expensive watch back to me. "So this is it," she sneered, recovering her footing. "This is your boss. He's the one paying for all this." She waved her hand around the expensive restaurant. "He must pay you really well. How much does he give you to afford a black card and a Maybach, Mo? Is that part of your bonus package?" She was practically shouting, trying to paint me as a kept woman, the only explanation her mind could grasp. Marcus let out a soft, almost imperceptible laugh. It wasn't a laugh of humor, but of pure irony. He looked at Simone with an expression of polite amusement, as if she were a child who had just confidently stated that the sky was green. "You've misunderstood, Simone," he said, his voice calm and disarming. "Monique doesn't work for me." He paused, letting that sink in. "She and I are partners. We built Aura Tech together from the ground up in a garage in Palo Alto 6 years ago." He gestured toward me, still seated, calmly sipping my wine. "I'm the CEO, yes. I handle the board and the investors. But Monique," he said, his voice filled with a deep, genuine respect that my family had never once shown me. "Monique is the chief technology officer. She isn't just part of the company, Simone. She's the brain behind it. Every piece of code, every algorithm, every single contract we've ever won, that was all her. I'm just the suit." The blood drained from Simone's face. Her forced, mocking smile faltered, replaced by a slack-jawed, blank stare. Ryan behind her looked like he'd been physically struck. "CTO," Simone finally sputtered, her voice cracking. "You're lying." She turned on me, her eyes wide with disbelief and a new rising panic. You, you're the CTO of a billion-dollar company, that's impossible. She let out a desperate, hysterical laugh. You're the failure. You're the one who couldn't even get into a real school. You didn't even go to the Ivy League. Dad had to pull strings just to get you into state college. I finally set my wine glass down. I looked up at my sister, my expression not angry, just tired. You're right, I said quietly. I didn't go to the Ivy League. You're thinking of your acceptance to Brown, the one Mom and Dad threw a party for. I leaned forward. I graduated from MIT, with honors, in computer science and artificial intelligence. I let the words land. But I don't blame you for forgetting. It was the same spring you were deciding between Vera Wang and Oscar de la Renta for your first wedding. I guess everyone was just preoccupied. Simone was completely silent. She just stared at me, her entire world visibly tilting on its axis. The narrative she had built her life around her superiority, my failure, had just been vaporized. I looked at my sister, at her pale, shocked face. The anger I had felt for so long was gone, replaced by a cold, quiet finality. You're right, Simone. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the restaurant's quiet. I didn't go to the Ivy League. I went to MIT. And you all forgot about it because you were busy planning your wedding. I leaned forward slightly. You and Mom and Dad, you all wrote me off. You decided I was the failure, the charity case, the disappointment. And why? I let the question hang. Because I didn't fit your narrative. Because I wasn't obsessed with money and status. Because I wasn't you. Simone started to stammer. Mo, I didn't. I kept my life private for a very simple reason. I continued, cutting her off. I wanted to see if any of you just once could be proud of me. Not my accomplishments, not my bank account, just me. I wanted to see if this family was capable of loving someone unconditionally. I picked up my wine glass and looked at her over the rim. And tonight in that lobby, when my own mother told me I wasn't part of the real family, and you told me to go to a Motel 6, I finally got my answer. You can't. Marcus, who had been watching this all with a quiet intensity, finally chimed in. He turned his polite, disarming smile back to Simone. And just in case you are still wondering about that company credit card, Simone, he said, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather. Monique's 40% stake in Oratech, the company we built together. It was just officially valued last week after the DoD contract. He paused just long enough. $1.2 billion. Billion. The word exploded into the silence between us. Simone's face went completely white. She physically stumbled backward, her hand flailing out to grab the back of an empty chair to steady herself. Her eyes were wide and blank. Billion, she stammered. $1.2 billion? I took a calm, deliberate bite of my scallop. It was perfectly cooked. I finally looked up at my sister, her entire world shattered and reforming around her. That's right, Simone, I said. Now you can go back to your table, you can finish your dinner, and you can report back to Mom and Dad. I gave her a small, cold smile. Enjoy your meal. Simone didn't walk back to her table. She stumbled, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Her usual confident cat-like grace was gone, replaced by the shaky steps of someone who had just looked over the edge of a cliff. Her face was a waxy, pale mask. Ryan stood up as she approached, his own expression a mix of irritation and confusion. Well, what happened? What did that guy say? She collapsed into her chair, her hands visibly trembling as she fumbled for her glass of water. Billion, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Ryan leaned in, annoyed. What? What are you talking about? Speak up, Simone. He said, $1.2 billion, she said, her voice cracking. He said she's the CTO, the brain. He said she's his partner. He said she went to MIT. Ryan's eyes widened, the color draining instantly from his face. The Centurion card, the Maybach, the private villa, the Michelin star restaurant. It all slammed into him at once, a tidal wave of information his brain couldn't process. She's She's a billionaire, he whispered, his voice filled with a sick, stunned awe. Monique, our Monique. Simone just stared at him, her eyes blank with the horror of her own actions. We told her to go to a Motel 6. Ryan didn't hesitate. He threw a handful of cash onto the table, far more than enough to cover their untouched drinks. He grabbed Simone by the arm, yanking her roughly to her feet. We have to go. We have to tell your father. Now. They practically ran out of the restaurant, ignoring the confused stares from the staff and the few other diners. The drive back to the sanctuary was a frantic, silent blur. They burst into Charles and Lorraine's oceanfront suite without knocking, finding Charles on the phone with his lawyer and Lorraine reading a fashion magazine. She's a billionaire, Simone shouted, the words tumbling out in a hysterical rush. Charles lowered his phone, his expression hardening. What did you say? Stop talking nonsense. It's true, Ryan gasped, leaning against the doorframe, his face pale and sweaty. Monique, she's not a charity worker. She's the co-founder and CTO of Oratech. That guy Marcus Thorne is the CEO. Charles, the company is worth over $1 billion. Her personal stake is... Lorraine dropped her magazine. What? That's impossible. She's just Monique. It is true, Simone shrieked, finally finding her voice. She went to MIT. She's been lying to us for years. She's been laughing at us. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Charles roared, a guttural sound of pure primal rage. He swept his arm across the ornate wet bar, sending a crystal highball glass shattering against the marble fireplace. Ice and expensive whiskey scattered across the pristine carpet. She dared. He bellowed, his face a dark shade of purple. She dared to lie to me, to this family. She played us. She sat there in that lobby and she made us look like fools. Lorraine, however, had a different, more terrifying realization. She sank onto the sofa, her hands flying to her mouth. She wasn't just angry, she was horrified. Oh, Charles! Charles, stop yelling! She was crying, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Don't you understand what this means? I understand perfectly, he roared. She's deceitful. She's manipulative. No, Lorraine sobbed, her words muffled by her hands. You don't get it. We just told our billionaire daughter that she wasn't part of the real family. We abandoned her. Charles, we told her to go to a Motel 6. We treated our daughter, our billionaire daughter, like she was garbage. The next morning was bright and clear. The storm of the previous night's family drama felt distant. I was miles away from the sanctuary, sitting on the sun-drenched upper deck of the Oratech corporate yacht, the Aura. It was less a boat and more a floating high-tech command center, complete with secure satellite internet and holographic data displays. Marcus and I were already working laptops, open spreadsheets, and code displayed on the screens in front of us. The ocean was calm, and a light breeze carried the scent of the sea. It was peaceful. My personal phone, which I had retrieved from the presidential suite and charged, suddenly rang, shattering the quiet. I looked at the screen. Charles. Marcus glanced at me. Right on schedule. I nodded, took a deep breath, and answered. I pressed the speakerphone button, placing the phone on the table between us. A voice I barely recognized flooded the deck. It was my father's, but it was dripping with a thick, fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. Monique? Oh, Monique, sweetheart, is that you? I said nothing. Monique, my love. He continued, his voice overflowing with false emotion. Your mother and I have been sick with worry. We've been calling all night. We were so afraid something had happened to you. Ryan told us what you've accomplished. We are just floored, sweetheart. I looked at Marcus, who was calmly sipping his coffee, his eyes revealing his amusement. We were fools, Monique. Charles went on, his voice thick with performative regret. Absolute fools. Last night, we were just in shock. We should have been proud of you. We are proud of you, so incredibly proud. I finally picked up the phone, my voice as calm and flat as the ocean in front of us. Dad, I said, cutting him off, let me ask you a question. Anything, sweetheart. Anything. Are you proud of me, I asked, or are you proud of my $1.2 billion? The fake warmth on the line died instantly. There was a heavy, loaded silence. I could picture him, his mind racing, trying to find the right words to navigate this. Monique, don't talk like that, he finally said, his voice strained as he tried to recapture the loving tone. That's not... We're family. We love you. The money... The money is just a wonderful bonus, a testament to your hard work. We just want to celebrate our daughter. Celebrate, I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. Yes, he said, seizing the word. That's exactly it. You have to come back to the resort, right now. We'll cancel our plans. We'll tell Simone to... We'll do whatever you want. We will throw you a party, Monique. A massive celebration right here. All our friends, the whole family. We'll show everyone how proud we are of you. I let the offer hang in the air for a moment, the sound of the small waves lapping against the yacht's hull filling the silence. A party. A celebration. Now that I was a billionaire, they wanted to celebrate me. The hypocrisy was so thick, I could barely breathe. No thank you, Dad. I said, my voice polite but unmistakably cold. I'm not interested in a party. What do you mean? His voice sputtered, the fake cheer evaporating. Monique, this is a wonderful opportunity. I have work to do, I interrupted, glancing at the complex data glowing on my laptop screen. Actual work. The work I've been doing for the last 6 years while you all thought I was a failure. And frankly, I added, my voice dropping an octave, I have absolutely no desire to celebrate anything with the people who abandoned me in a hotel lobby less than 24 hours ago. Abandoned. Don't be so dramatic, Monique. It was a misunderstanding. Before I could respond, I heard a scuffle on the other end, and my mother's voice, high-pitched and frantic, burst through the phone. Lorraine had clearly grabbed the phone from him. Monique, you can't mean that, she cried, her voice strained with panic. You have to forgive us. We made a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. But your family, you have to help us. You have everything now. You have all this money and we... Her voice broke, and I heard her whisper away from the phone. Charles, tell her. You have to tell her now. There was another muffled sound, and then my father's voice was back on the line. But this time all the fake warmth, all the blustering anger was gone. It was replaced by a sound I had never heard from him before: desperation. Monique, he said, his voice low and strained. The company, my company, is in trouble. I waited, saying nothing. It's the audit, he said, the words rushing out now, forced and humiliated. It's bad. I made some bad investments. I leveraged the assets to cover. It doesn't matter. The point is, I'm in serious debt, Monique. The bank is calling my loans. I'm going to lose everything. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just about pride then. It wasn't just about the humiliation of his daughter being richer than he was. It was about the money. I need a loan, sweetheart, he stammered. A significant one. Just to get through this. You're my daughter. You can help. So there it was. The real reason for the call. The real reason for the fake apologies. The sudden pride, the desperate pleas for family. They didn't see a daughter they had wronged. They saw a solution. They saw a bank. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, dead. So that's it. That's the real reason. You need my money. I didn't wait for his answer. I didn't need one. I ended the call. I stared at the black, silent screen of my phone. The sound of my father's desperate, pleading voice still echoed in the quiet air of the yacht deck. I can't believe it, I whispered, looking at Marcus. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. I actually thought for a second that he was calling because he felt bad. because he was ashamed of what they did. I shook my head, the naivete of it making me feel sick. He wasn't ashamed. He was just calculating. He was just figuring out the angle. Monique, you can't be surprised, Marcus said gently. This is who they've always been. You just have a higher price tag now. He didn't even try to hide it, I said, the anger rising hot and sharp. He didn't even try to pretend he cared about me for more than 30 seconds. He just saw a solution to his money problems. He saw a walking, talking ATM. I stood up, too agitated to sit, and walked to the railing of the yacht. I gripped the cool metal, staring down at the water. He asks me for a loan, after abandoning me, after letting Simone and Ryan treat me like I was nothing. The full, humiliating weight of their actions, the Motel 6, the real family, the failure slammed back into me now, compounded by this greedy, desperate plea for money. They are unbelievable, I seethed, turning back to Marcus. They are completely devoid of any. My words were cut off by the sharp metallic ringing of Marcus's satellite phone. It was his private line, the one reserved for emergencies and high-level board members. It never rang with good news. Marcus's relaxed posture vanished. He was instantly alert, answering before the second ring. Thorne. He listened. His back, which had been relaxed against the lounge chair, went ramrod straight. The color drained from his face. What? He said, his voice sharp, all business. Where? When did this happen? He stood up, pacing a small, tight circle on the deck. Is he stable? Understood? Yes. Yes, of course. We are on our way. 20 minutes. Tell them we are coming. He ended the call, his face a mask of grim seriousness. He looked at me, and my own heart began to pound in my chest, a sudden cold dread washing over me. Marcus, I whispered. What is it? What happened? He hesitated, his eyes full of a pain that wasn't his own. He was clearly trying to find the right words. Monique, he said, his voice low and steady. There's been an accident. At the resort. At your family's hotel. An accident? Who is it? Is it my mom? My dad? Marcus took a step toward me, his expression somber. It's Jaden, he said. It's your nephew. He held my gaze, his voice gentle but firm. Mo. He fell. He fell from their balcony on the 3rd floor. He landed on the concrete pool deck below. The yacht raced back to the private dock. The chauffeur was already waiting, the Maybach's engine running. The 20-minute drive to Hilton Head Hospital was a silent, high-speed blur. Marcus was on his phone making calls, his voice low and urgent, arranging things I couldn't even process. I just stared out the window, my mind numb. Jaden, 3 years old, that little boy with my sister's eyes. It didn't seem real. We burst through the automatic doors of the emergency room. The waiting area was a stark, sterile white, smelling of antiseptic and fear. And there they were. My family. But they were shattered, unrecognizable. They were huddled in a small, private waiting nook, a picture of pure chaos. My mother, Lorraine, was sitting ramrod straight on a vinyl chair, her white linen dress now rumpled and stained with tears. She was holding Simone, who was collapsed against her, wailing. It wasn't a quiet cry, but a raw, animalistic sound of pure agony. Ryan, Simone's husband, wasn't the smug, polished man from the lobby. He was a wreck. His expensive shirt was untucked, his hair was matted with sweat, and he was pacing back and forth in a tight, frantic circle, running his hands through his hair and muttering, "No, no, no, no." My father, Charles, was slumped against the far wall, his face a shocking ashen gray. He looked 100 years old. All the anger, all the authority was gone. He just stared blankly at the floor, a broken man. Lorraine was the first to see me. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. "Monique," she cried out, her voice cracking with a desperate, shocking relief. "Oh, thank God you're here, Jaden. Oh God, Monique. But before she could finish, Simone's wailing stopped. She pushed herself away from my mother, her head rising slowly. Her beautiful face was a mess, swollen and streaked with tears and mascara. But when her eyes locked on me, they were not filled with grief. They were filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that echoed in the small room. She scrambled to her feet, pointing a shaking finger at me. "What are you doing here?" Her voice rose to a scream. "Get out! What are you doing here, to mock us, to laugh?" "Simone, stop," my father whispered, but she didn't hear him. "This is your fault," she shrieked, lunging toward me before Ryan grabbed her arm. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't made that scene, if you hadn't been so selfish and dramatic, we would have been there. We would have been watching him. This is on you." I recoiled, staggering back a step, as if she had physically struck me. The word fault seemed to echo in the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor. My fault," I whispered, the sound barely audible. How could this possibly be my fault? I was miles away on a yacht trying to escape them. "Yes, your fault!" Simone shrieked, her voice tearing through the quiet hum of the ER. She tore herself free from Ryan's restraining grip and lunged toward me. Her manicured fingers pointed like claws at my chest. You did this. You always ruin everything." "Lorraine," my mother just continued to sob. "Oh, Simone, no, don't. No," Simone screamed, ignoring her. Her eyes locked on mine, wild with grief and a familiar, terrifying rage. "She needs to hear it. We were fine. We were all fine until she started this, until she made that phone call." My blood ran cold. The phone call. The call where my father begged me for money. What are you talking about? "Mom and Dad were devastated after you hung up on them." She yelled, her words echoing off the tile. "Dad was furious, Mom was hysterical. They were a mess, Ryan and I. We couldn't even talk to them. We just needed a minute. We went for a walk on the beach. Just 10 minutes. That's all." She was sobbing hysterically now, great gulping breaths that seemed to tear her apart. "We left Jaden with them, in the suite. They were supposed to be watching him." She paused, her breath hitching. "But they were distracted. They were fighting about you, about your money, about what you said. They were distracted by your selfishness." She took a staggering step closer. "And he climbed, oh God, Ryan, he climbed over the balcony railing." She collapsed into a fresh wave of sobs, clutching her stomach as Ryan rushed to hold her up. "If you hadn't called," she spat through her tears, "if you hadn't upset them, they would have been watching him. This never would have happened. You. She couldn't even say the words, but her eyes screamed them. "You killed my son." The accusation was monstrous. A twisted, desperate attempt to shift the blame for their own catastrophic negligence onto me. I felt the world tilt. I felt my knees buckle, and Marcus put a strong, steadying hand on my arm. This was a nightmare. This was not real. "Simone, be quiet." My father, Charles, finally spoke. His voice was rough, choked, his face ashen. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Simone. "This is not the time for this. Stop it. Not here." Was he defending me? Or was he just terrified of the truth of their failure being screamed in a public hospital? It didn't matter. The damage was done. In her grief, Simone had just handed me the weapon. She couldn't see the truth. They were distracted. They were negligent. And it was their obsession with my money that had caused it. Before I could even find the words to defend myself against this horrific, twisted logic, the heavy double doors to the trauma bay swung open with a pneumatic hiss. A doctor in blue scrubs, his face grim and shadowed with exhaustion, stepped out. He pulled off his surgical mask, revealing a tired, serious expression. "Family for Jaden Whitfield." The fragile, toxic bubble of our family drama instantly evaporated, replaced by a new, sharper terror. Ryan and Charles surged forward at the same time, their voices desperate and broken. "That's us! I'm his father!" Ryan pleaded, grabbing the doctor's arm. I'm his grandfather, Charles said, his voice cracking, all his manufactured authority gone. How is he? Is he alive? Please, doctor, just tell us. How is my grandson? Dr. Evans looked at the desperate faces of my father and brother-in-law, his expression grim and deeply tired. He held up a hand, his voice low and steady, commanding the room. Your son, your grandson, is alive. We've managed to stabilize him for now. A collective shuddering sigh of relief went through my family. Ryan sagged against the wall and Lorraine let out a small sob, but the doctor wasn't finished. However, he continued, and the word landed like a stone, the fall was significant. He has sustained a severe traumatic brain injury. There is significant swelling. He paused, his eyes meeting theirs with unblinking seriousness. He also has a high cervical spine fracture, a C-spine injury. Ryan just stared, not comprehending. C-spine. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Evans said, his voice grave, that the fall has severely damaged his spinal cord at the base of his neck. The situation is extremely critical. We need to relieve the pressure on both his brain and his spinal cord immediately, or... He didn't need to finish the sentence. My father Charles, finding his voice of command, stepped forward. Then what are we waiting for? Get him into surgery. Do whatever you have to do. Just save him. I'll pay for it, whatever it costs. Dr. Evans shook his head slowly, and the look on his face was one of profound frustration. Sir, you don't understand. That's the problem. What problem? Ryan demanded, his voice rising. He's stable, right? Just operate. We can't. Dr. Evans said, the words hitting even harder than Simone's accusations. This hospital, Hilton Head General, we are a fantastic regional facility, but we are not equipped for this specific, highly specialized procedure. We do not have the pediatric neurosurgical microsurgery equipment required for an operation this delicate. He looked at Charles, then at Ryan. And even if we had the equipment, we do not have the specialist. There are maybe 5 surgeons in the country who specialize in this exact type of pediatric spinal trauma. Your grandson doesn't just need a neurosurgeon, he needs a specific one. And Dr. Evans's words hung in the sterile air, heavy and absolute. There is one person, he said, his voice low, the leading expert, arguably the only expert on this specific type of pediatric C-spine trauma, is Dr. Alistair Reed. He's the head of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Baltimore. That was a world away. So what are we waiting for? Ryan demanded, his voice cracking with a mixture of terror and his usual take-charge attitude. Call him. Get a helicopter, a plane, whatever it takes. Just get my son to Johns Hopkins. It's not that simple, Mr. Whitfield, Dr. Evans said, his gaze unflinching. To move him safely, we would need a fully equipped critical care medical flight, a medevac jet staffed with a pediatric trauma team just to get him there. Then call them, Ryan shouted, his control breaking. Call Johns Hopkins. Tell them we're coming. I don't care what it costs. Just do it. Dr. Evans held up his hand, his expression pained. He looked at Charles, then at Lorraine, then back at Ryan. He was a man about to deliver a second devastating blow. Mr. Whitfield, please listen to me. Dr. Reed's surgical protocol for this is still considered experimental, and he, along with his specialized team at Johns Hopkins, is profoundly out of network for your insurance. I don't care about insurance, Charles boomed, stepping forward. I will write a check. Just make the call. The doctor looked down at his clipboard, then back at my father. Sir, I don't think you understand the scale of what's involved. Because this is an experimental out-of-network emergency transport and procedure, the hospital Johns Hopkins will not even schedule the operating room, and the medevac company will not even start its engines without payment in full, up front. A different kind of silence fell over the group. The raw panic was replaced by a cold financial dread. Up front, Lorraine whispered, her voice trembling. What? What does that mean? What are we talking about? Dr. Evans took a deep breath. He looked like a man who hated his job, hated this part of it most of all. He had seen this scene before. The medevac flight, fully staffed with a pediatric ICU team from Charleston, will be roughly $200,000, he said, his voice flat and clinical. The retainer for Dr. Reed and his surgical team just to assemble is $500,000. The specialized operating room, the equipment, the post-operative ICU care. We are looking at an estimated prepaid cost of, he paused, letting them brace, $1.5 million. $1.5 million. The number just hung there. It was an abstraction, an impossibility. Ryan, who had been vibrating with frantic energy, simply stopped. He stared at the doctor, his mouth slightly open, as if the doctor had just started speaking a foreign language. Simone, who had been sobbing into my mother's shoulder, went completely still. Her head lifted, her eyes wide and blank with a new, different kind of horror. My father, Charles, the man who defined himself by his financial success, the man who had just tried to demand a loan from his billionaire daughter, just deflated. I watched his shoulders slump, his face go slack. He knew in that instant that he couldn't do it. His bluff had been called by a reality far harsher than his own ego. 1.5. Ryan finally stammered the words, catching in his throat. But we don't have that. Charles, we don't have that right now. Do we? My father didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, his face gray. His company was being audited. His assets were frozen. The grand patriarch of the Whitfield family, the man who had just tried to barter his family pride for a loan, was utterly, completely, and publicly powerless. The doctor's words, $1.5 million, sucked all the air out of the room. It wasn't just a number, it was an execution. Simone was the first to break. She didn't just cry, she crumpled. Her legs seemed to dissolve beneath her, and she slid down the wall to the sterile tile floor, her hands pressed against her mouth. No, she whispered the word, dry and cracked. No, no, we can't. She looked up at Ryan, her face a mask of desperate, pleading denial. We don't have that, Ryan. We don't have that kind of money. Ryan, who had been vibrating with frantic energy, went completely still. His face turned a sickly pale white. My commissions, he stammered, his voice barely audible. The real estate market is frozen. Everything is locked up in escrow. I can't. He looked at his own hands as if they had betrayed him. He, the successful broker, the provider, was completely useless. Simone's head snapped toward her father, her eyes wild with a new frantic last-ditch hope. Dad, she screamed, scrambling toward him, grabbing the leg of his expensive trousers. Dad, you have to do it. Your company, Wilson Enterprises. You said you were landing the new city contract. You're rich. You can pay him. Just pay him. Charles. My father didn't move. He was still slumped against the wall, his face gray and slack. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. Dad, Simone shrieked again, shaking his leg. Did you hear me? Pay the doctor, save my son? Charles finally looked down at her. His eyes were blank, defeated. When he spoke, his voice was a dry, rattling whisper, the sound of a balloon deflating. I can't, Simone. What do you mean you can't? Ryan spat, his voice sharp with disbelief. This is your grandson. The company. Charles choked out the admission, tearing him apart. The audit. It wasn't routine. It's serious. He looked at my mother, his shame palpable. They've frozen the accounts, Lorraine. All of them. I can't access that kind of money. Not today. It would take weeks, maybe longer. The doctor, who had been watching this family meltdown with a practiced, weary patience, finally stepped in. His voice was firm, cutting through the hysteria. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield, but we don't have weeks. We don't even have days. He looked directly at Simone, his gaze softening with pity, but hard with reality. "We have hours, maybe 3 or 4 at most. If we don't get your son into that operating room, the swelling in his spinal cord will become permanent." He let that sink in. He will never walk again, or worse. The finality of it, the ticking clock, shattered the last of their composure. Simone let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a raw, primal wail of pure despair. Lorraine rushed to her, wrapping her arms around her daughter, both of them collapsing into a sobbing heap on the floor. Ryan, his face contorted in a mask of rage and total impotence, turned and slammed his fist into the drywall, the sharp crack echoing the final brutal breaking of their lives. They were trapped. All their bragging, all their status, all the Louis Vuitton luggage and five-star resorts. It was an illusion, a thin, brittle shell. And in the one moment it truly mattered, it had crumbled to dust, leaving them completely, utterly helpless. Simone was a heap on the floor, her breathing ragged and broken. Her gaze was wild, darting from the impassive doctor to her weeping mother, to her husband, who was now just staring blankly at the hole he had punched in the wall. They were useless. Her father, the great Charles Whitfield, was a gray statue of defeat. They were all useless. Then her eyes, swollen and red, snapped across the room and locked onto me. I was standing near the entrance with Marcus, perfectly still. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't moved. I was just watching. She stared at me, her mind visibly racing, her grief-soaked brain making a new desperate calculation. The presidential suite, the Maybach, the calm way Marcus had dismissed her in the restaurant, the $1 billion, and that card, the black card. "You," she whispered, her voice a raw, broken croak. Before I could even react, she lunged. She didn't stand up, she crawled. She scrambled across the sterile, cold tile of the emergency room floor on her hands and knees like an animal. She reached me and grabbed the hem of my pants, her grip like a steel trap. "Monique!" she screamed, her face pressed against my leg, her voice muffled by the fabric. "Monique, please, you have to. You have the money, I know you do." I just looked down at the top of her head at her expensive blonde highlights, feeling nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. I felt Marcus's hand lightly touch my back, a silent, steadying presence. "You have that card," she shrieked, looking up at me, her beautiful face completely destroyed by tears and mucus and pure primal terror. "That black card. You can pay him. You can save my son. You can save Jaden." She was sobbing, incoherent, clinging to me. "I'll do anything, Monique. I'll do anything. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Ryan, hearing this, snapped out of his stupor. He rushed over, stopping just short of grabbing me himself. "Monique, please," he begged, his voice cracking, all the smugness, all the Motel 6 condescension completely gone, replaced by the raw panic of a terrified father. "She's right. You can help. We'll pay you back. I swear. Every penny. Somehow. We'll figure it out. Just please, please save my son." I didn't look at them. I looked past their desperate, groveling faces. I looked at my parents. Charles and Lorraine were standing frozen, watching this horrifying tableau. Their pride, their arrogance, their entire life's foundation of superiority. It had completely shattered. They were watching their golden child, their perfect daughter, and their favored son-in-law, literally groveling on the floor at the feet of the daughter they had abandoned. They were now forced in silent, agonizing humiliation to pin their only hope on the one person they had thrown away. I looked down at my sister. Simone was still clinging to my leg, her sobs echoing in the small, cold room. I saw Ryan's desperate, pleading eyes. I looked past them at my parents. My mother was weeping silently, her hand over her mouth. My father, Charles, was staring at me, his face a mask of gray, humiliated defeat. All their power, all their arrogance, all their judgment had evaporated. They were nothing, just scared, helpless people begging at the feet of the daughter they had thrown away. My face was blank. I felt nothing, no pity, no triumph, just a cold, sharp, absolute clarity. Slowly, deliberately, I bent down and peeled Simone's fingers off my leg. She looked up at me, her eyes begging. I stepped around her as if she were a piece of furniture and walked past my stunned family, stopping directly in front of Dr. Evans. He looked at me confused, expecting me to join the hysteria. I ignored my family's desperate, hopeful stares. "Doctor," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of Simone's renewed sobs. It was clear, professional, and completely devoid of emotion. "You said Dr. Reed at Johns Hopkins is the specialist." "Yes," he said, frowning. "But as I explained, transporting Jaden is too high risk," I interrupted. "His condition is too unstable, so we won't transport the patient." I held his gaze. "We'll transport the surgeon. What if we could bring Dr. Reed here, to this hospital with his own surgical team and his specialized equipment?" Dr. Evans stared at me as if I were insane. "Ms. Whitfield, I don't think you understand. We're not talking about booking a commercial flight. We are talking about mobilizing an entire private critical care surgical team, their $1 million worth of specialized equipment, and flying them here from Baltimore." He shook his head, frustrated. That's logistically impossible. In hours? Who could possibly do that?" I didn't answer him. I simply turned to Marcus, who had been standing silently by the door observing everything. "Marcus," I said. He was already pulling out his phone. "On it. Call Dr. Reed directly. Use my authorization. Tell him it's a code Aura personal emergency." Behind me, I heard my father choke out a sound. Code Aura Tech Monique, you are..." I ignored him. Marcus put the phone to his ear, his voice calm and authoritative. "Alistair? Yes, it's Marcus Thorne. I'm fine. Listen, I have an urgent personal emergency. I'm at Hilton Head Hospital with our CTO, Monique Whitfield. Her nephew, 3 years old, has a severe C-spine trauma." "Yes, exactly. The local team can't handle it." Marcus listened, then nodded. "Excellent. I'm sending the company's Gulfstream G700 to Baltimore for you now. It will be at your private hangar in 30 minutes. Bring your entire team and whatever equipment you need. We will handle everything on this end." Marcus ended the call. He turned not to my family but to Dr. Evans, his voice crisp and decisive, the voice of a CEO executing a high-stakes plan. "Dr. Reed is on his way," he said. "The Oratech Gulfstream G700 is en route to Baltimore to retrieve him and his surgical team. He and his specialized equipment will be airborne within the hour. They will land here in approximately 90 minutes. He then looked at my father, a brief, dismissive glance. "Oratech will assume all financial responsibility for the transport and the procedure. You will not see a bill." Dr. Evans, who was used to dealing with frantic families, looked completely stunned. He just nodded, speechless, and immediately turned to hurry back into the trauma bay, presumably to prepare for the arrival of the world's best surgeon. In the sterile corridor, there was a deafening silence. Simone, Ryan, Charles, and Lorraine just stood there frozen. Their faces were a grotesque mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. This was the payoff. The moment the entire narrative of our family shattered. The truth was now unavoidable. Monique the failure. Monique the disorganized one. Monique the charity worker who couldn't afford her own hotel room. Monique the selfish daughter who wasn't part of the real family. That Monique was the only one in this room who could save Jaden's life. She had done it not with begging or tears, but with a single calm phone call that mobilized a private jet and one of the most famous surgeons in the world. She had done it with a power they couldn't even begin to comprehend. My mother Lorraine was the first to speak. Her voice was a trembling, broken whisper. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Monique," she stammered. That phone call. He called you the CTO? Monique, you are the CTO?" I finally turned to look at her. I looked at her tear-streaked face, at my father's ashen, defeated expression, at Ryan's blank stare of disbelief. My voice was quiet. There was no anger left. There was no triumph. There was just the end. You were right, Mom, I said, my voice steady. You were right in the lobby. I am all alone. I've always been on my own. So I learned a very long time ago how to take care of myself. Then I turned my gaze to my sister. Simone was still on the floor, her body trembling, her eyes wide with a new, terrifying mixture of shame, horror, and a desperate, fragile hope. And you were right too, Simone, I said, my voice just as calm, just as final, when you told me we weren't a real family. I let the words land echoing in the terrible silence. Because you're right. A real family. A real family would never abandon one of their own in a hotel lobby and tell them to find a Motel 6. I didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing more to say. I turned my back on all of them, on their shame, their desperation, and their useless apologies. I walked past them down the corridor to the large window at the end that overlooked the hospital's helipad. I stood there alone and watched the empty, darkening sky, waiting for the help that I had summoned. The ultimate lesson from this story is that your self-worth must come from within, not from the validation of those who refuse to see you. Monique's family dismissed her as a failure because she didn't fit their shallow definition of success. They abandoned her in a moment of humiliation, proving they were not a real family. But when their world collapsed in a true crisis, their money and status were useless. They were forced to beg for salvation from the very person they had thrown away. This is a powerful reminder. Be careful how you treat people. The failure you mock today might be the only person with the power to save you tomorrow. Have you ever been underestimated by your family only to become the one they needed most? Share your story in the comments below.